Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our latest webinar. I'm Tara Jacquin, Associate Account Director here at Cision, and I'll be your moderator for the next hour as we delve into the crazy world of PR stunts. Back when PR's role was exclusively based around media relations, the PR stunt was a great way of getting a quick hit of coverage. But in 2019, while delivering coverage is still important, there needs to be a strategy beyond getting coverage for coverage's sake. So what is the stunt's place in this new comms landscape? To find out, we've enlisted two senior comms leaders who have created their fair share of stunts. Firstly, we have Mandy, founder and CEO of Tin Man Comms, and she's about to discuss that she isn't a big fan of doing stunts for the sake of it, but when she does, she makes sure they create cut-through. I'll let her reveal some of the great award-winning stunts Tin Man has produced when she presents in a couple of minutes. We're also joined by Radioactive PR founder Leigh. Not only has Rich developed and implemented a whole range of stunts, he loves them so much that he set up a website which pays homage to them. You can find that at prexamples.com. A quick reminder that you can put your questions to Mandy and Rich using the Q&A tab. We'll get through as many as we can towards the end of the webinar. Right, rather than hearing from me, let's hand over to our guest. And Mandy, it's over to you.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so I'll kick off. The use of stunts in modern PR from my perspective. So what I'm going to talk through today is I'll just give you a quick overview of me and then go a little bit back to basics and just talk about what actually is a stunt and why and when I believe is a good time to use it. And then I'll take you through just some of my kind of golden rules of things to think about when you're doing a stunt and some examples of where stunts have worked really well for us and why. So there I am. The founder of Tin Man, set up Tin Man 5 years ago, but been in PR for a number of years, 20 years, and worked across the piece, across lots of different clients, as you can see there, everything from kind of Barclays to Virgin Media to Nickelodeon, so all sorts of brands. And I've done a number of kind of stunt-led activity in my time. Essentially, I suppose my passion is I'm not a stunt for stunt's sake, as I was introduced initially, but I'm much more about trying to create big, creative consumer comms that deliver, and if a stunt is there and will deliver those results, then great. So, what's a stunt? So if you look it up in the dictionary, this is the actual description that you get. Mainly disapproving, something that is done to get attention for the person or people responsible for it. So I think it's just quite useful just to go back to that and just remind ourselves where the word stunt comes from and why we do them. And essentially, it is about creating noise or creating that kind of big bang moment for a brand, a message, a purpose, a something. And it's just about how you do that in a way that cuts through and delivers impact. And obviously, that has changed quite significantly over the years. Essentially, I think if you're going to summarise it in a slide, a stunt is a visual or physical realisation of a message. And I think it's always quite important to just remember why a stunt works and what it's about. And I'll sort of explain why I always go back to the basics as I go through this. Essentially, I suppose when I think about a stunt, I think about the picture and the image, and that's normally at the core of, I think, what a stunt can really deliver better and over and above other areas and other tactics when it comes to comms. Because, the age-old phrase, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I suppose what we mean by that is that it's that notion that sometimes complex ideas or complex messages can be conveyed with a single picture in a much easier and more dramatic and more effective way. And that is the key thing about an effective stunt, I believe. And it's about how you get there to do that. I think moving kind of the last kind of, I would say, 5-10 years, the purpose and the role of stunts has changed quite significantly. And I am a big believer that a stunt alone is usually not enough to make an impact in modern PR. And it's quite a risky route to take in isolation from other comms routes and other activity. And I'm a big believer that it has to be part of a campaign. However, we do get this quite a lot from clients or new business prospects. We just want a stunt. And I hear this time and time again. And this is kind of my immediate answer. It's kind of, yeah, you want a stunt, but why? Why do you want a stunt? And I think this is probably one of the most important elements of I would say, from my perspective, this presentation today. Because I think we have to educate ourselves and think quite carefully when a stunt is right. And I think when a client comes to you and says, we want a stunt, and you question why they want a stunt, often it's because somebody in the business has seen a stunt and they like the look of it and they want to replicate it and they want the same thing. It is less about the tactic. It's much more about going back to the basics and understanding what is the comms challenge you're talking to us about trying to achieve and solve. It's thinking about the why rather than the tactic, and I'm a big believer in that. You don't start comms PR with a tactic or a channel. You start with the challenge or the problem, and you look at what the idea is to solve that comms challenge, and you work back from that. And a stunt may or may not be the right route, but there are a lot of questions that you have to ask yourself as to whether a stunt is right for that approach and to deliver the result you need. So the first thing I would always say is when we get asked to do a stunt is, what's the comms challenge we're trying to solve here? Who are we trying to reach? Is the audience we're talking to, will a stunt deliver that? And what else is needed to make sure you reach the audience? What's the best channel or approach? Yes, a stunt might work, but it won't work in isolation. Who's going to see it? Is the ROI worth it? Because often stunts do, or can, I mean, obviously not always, but can mean production of some sort and cost. And is, probably just the most crucial thing, is the message that we're trying to get out and the output that we want to deliver, can that be conveyed in a sentence through a one-off big visual moment? And often the answer is a bit of yes and a bit of no, and it's about finding the right solution. So I think really the campaigns that have involved stunts from Tin Man, the most successful campaigns have always started with an idea first and the layers form on top. And I always talk about layered campaigns because really it's about how you amplify an idea that is important, and the layers provide those various touch points to reach audiences in a number of ways, whether it's digital, social, news stories, features, picture moment, broadcast, etc. And obviously there's loads of different kind of routes to take that message out there. But you have to have the layers and you have to have the campaign around it. So these are just 5, I suppose, kind of golden rules, if you like, when you're thinking about a stunt from my perspective. If you're going to go the stunt route, think about simplicity. Keep the message simple. Can you explain that message, that purpose, whatever it is you're trying to say in one line? Because that's kind of all you've got. What's the story? Is there a deeper purpose? Is there a deeper story? Is there something clever about what you're doing? And try and avoid stunts that are just kind of one-dimensional, because they tend to have less pickup and kind of less traction. Of course, number 3 is like same old. Now, don't get me wrong, we've done this. We've used these locations a number of times for our own stunts. But I would try and avoid overused locations because they are overused. They do create a good shot, I have to say, but there are other ways and means of delivering that kind of same result without doing the same kind of locations. Do you have a safety net? So if the Queen died, God forbid, and your stunt died with it, do you have a backup for securing coverage? Because at the end of the day, your stunt, if it's going to be a big one-off stunt, it's a one-off moment, and it's quite a risky tactic. And obviously there's the kind of shareability, because we talked about media coverage, but there's so much more now in terms of getting that message out there. So would you share it if you saw it? Would you talk about it? Is it going to create some sort of impact? Does it have a deeper message behind it that's shareable? So I've got a few examples of ones that have worked. There's 3 different ones here. All of them have a stunt element within it, but they are much kind of more integrated as a campaign. This is Thriver. This was a campaign for a preventative healthcare brand whereby you can check your internal health through blood tests, which you take at home and you send off. And they wanted to create some impact around January when all health brands are pushing, the same message of get healthy, get fit, etc. So we did feel that actually a visual and quite dramatic stunt for this was the right route, given lots of sort of research we did around the audience. And It's won various awards, as you can see, and we ended up creating a giant, and I mean literally giant, fatberg. And the clever thing about this was it's 12 foot, it was made of real animal lard, and it was toured around London, and we did all the usual shots. But it actually had quite a clever message that we could explain it in a kind of one line, because the gigantic size of the fatberg represented the exact collective weight gain of Britain over the Christmas period. So straight away, we could start talking to people about their health in quite a kind of numbers-driven way. And it was supported with lots of stats and science behind the kind of, you know, the problem that we have in Britain is that we are very obsessed with our outside image and less obsessed by our inside image. I think maybe that's changing. So that was kind of the sort of deeper message that we were trying to get across with this stunt. And there you go, classic shot of person in front of lovely London skyline, touching this revolting, and it really was revolting, fatberg. But it was impactful, it was big, and it made an impact, and it delivered a hell of a lot of coverage, as you can see here. But I would say that I use this because it is a kind of really good representation of a typical kind of stunt. This stunt worked because it was wrapped in proper news, and it was wrapped in stats, it was wrapped in figures. We had something quite important to say. It had a much deeper message. It wasn't a stunt for stunt's sake. It was just a visually impactful way of delivering a message that thousands of us are putting on a huge amount of weight over Christmas, and we need to kind of wake up to that and be aware of it. And you can see here some of the results from the coverage. You can see some of the awareness and the perception changes in this sort of bottom left-hand box, and you can see quite a significant uplift there, and new customers, etc. National Geographic was another campaign we did, very different type of stunt, because I wouldn't call this necessarily a traditional stunt, but it was still a visual amplification of quite an important message. And this was about trying to promote National Geographic's Big Cats initiative, which is about saving lions and tigers and big cats in Africa. And we had to try and get Brits to be engaged with this. And the reality is that there are hundreds of charities that Britons are far more engaged with because they're on their doorstep, and trying to get them to think about things that are happening in Africa is quite tricky. So what we did was something I felt quite clever, is that we used the traditional kind of visual of a missing cat poster that you see all over the streets of London and the UK, and we kind of replicated that into something quite big. And this actually won the PR Week's General Campaign of the Month and various other things. So we used that format. We created, if you like, a sort of stunt, but actually it was a giant poster, which was a missing cat poster. It featured Archie. He was one of the cats that was in danger, and it was being broadcast on the National Geographic show. And the clever thing about this was that it wasn't done with usual kind of paints. It was done with a certain type of chalk that meant that as people walked across this poster, the picture faded away, which was quite a poignant reminder that lions are literally being erased from the face of the earth through human interaction. And this was very kind of easy to explain through the message of this poster, and that was what made it so impactful. We then turned this into actually an advertising campaign, and this is just a poster so you can see the kind of message. It was very simple to explain the message of the missing cat, because it was literally a poster that went missing during the day. We created lots of content and time-lapse video, etc. around that, and it was really impactful. But yes, we took it a bit further than just that one-off, and we actually created a missing cat poster campaign that went across, I think, 5 cities across the UK to create real impact. And here you can see some of the coverage. It was amazing, but the thing that was really great was that it was, as I say, part of a campaign, and we had spokespeople on the sofa talking on the Victoria Derbyshire show, etc. It was a fully rounded campaign, and that kind of stunt element was just one part of it. I won't go through these, but it delivered well. And then finally, I suppose this is again a slightly different stunt-led piece of activity, but one of the things that I think stunts work very well for is when there's a purpose-led motive behind it, and this does that because this is for Water Aid, and this was designed to designed to fundraise as well as create awareness. And this won Best PR Event and Stunt of the Year, PR Moment. So for this campaign, we tried to do something very visual and very simple. Budget was quite tight, but it was quite a dramatic image where we took the icon of the bucket, which everyone knows and relates straight away to WaterAid. And we created a kind of bucket memorial, if you like. Again, great shot on, so I'm kind of talking about don't use the same shots, but here I go showing everyone that we've done it, so I'm quite honest about that. But it created a very, very impactful shot, and the reality was that people could come along, they could see these buckets, and they could actually buy a bucket and save a child's life there and then, because each bucket represented the number of kids that die every single day due to lack of clean water. And that was the key thing. The message was in the medium. There were 800 buckets alongside the River Thames, which was obviously a stark reminder of children's lives lost every day. And it was as simple as that. So it's a very simple core idea, visualised in a very kind of dramatic way. And it was an unbelievable amount of buckets. 800 doesn't sound a lot, but when you look at it from a visual perspective, it's huge. And you can see the impact that it had. And again, worked really well across media, worked really well across content, all the touch points, etc. And there you go. And I won't go through this, but it delivered very well. But I think there's just kind of three different kind of examples of campaigns that show how stunts work, but in different ways. Oh, do you want me to do this one? Shall I carry on? Yeah? Okay. One more, and I'll be quick. This is Matilda. This was to celebrate Matilda turning 30. Again, a sort of stunt piece of activity formed part of it, but again, it was much more a bigger campaign than just a stunt. We needed to try and engage people to kind of reappraise Matilda 30 years after the book was published. So we decided to invite the public to reimagine what Matilda would be doing in her 30s, including lots of things, but one of the things was who would she be standing up to nowadays? Like who's the modern day Trunchbull? And of course, guess who came up? Trump, followed by Theresa May and Piers Morgan. And we did quite a kind of in-depth study around this, and we came up with some lovely research that also found that half the British people think Matilda would still have her power of telekinesis, travel the world, and been knighted by the Queen. So lots of lovely kind of stats and research to support the story. But the way we brought this to life was through a kind of statue that showed little Matilda on her throne of books, facing up to a modern-day Trunchbull, who, of course, was Donald Trump. The content of this is actually better than the image, if I'm being honest, and the video is really good. But it gives you an idea of, I suppose, how a stunt can add to a story and create a bigger impact. And it was very effective, and you can see here the story, the picture, and all the elements of the campaign, and how it was very, very successful. I think it had something like 18,000 tweets, I think, in the first 3 hours. It was phenomenal. So it was really good. There you go. Here's some of the coverage. Yeah, 150 pieces of coverage in 2 days. It trended on Twitter, and it created real impact. But it wasn't about the stunt. It was much more about the story and the campaign and the idea that started that really delivered. The stunt was just a visual element that added to it. Oh, don't worry about those. There you go. I'm done.
All right, we good to go? Amazing. Rich Leigh here talking about PR stunts, and one of the points made in setting up this webinar was, are PR stunts old-fashioned? What do people think of them? Let's get more of an idea as to, what we can do with them. I'm here. I absolutely love that kind of Jim Moran, I guess, era of stunts, the older, perhaps more literal stunt. And there's a book by Mark Bukowski that I'd thoroughly recommend called The Fame Formula, where he kind of delves into that. So I got a real interest in this kind of stunt. And in 2012, I founded PR Examples, which I think now has more than 3,000 posts and is well read throughout PR, and is now owned by James over at Taylor Herring. I sold it last year, and I still keep a very good eye on what's going on. I've kind of created PR Examples just as a way to keep my eye on, I guess, and also celebrate the good stunts and good creative campaigns that people work on. And I've probably worked on, if I'm thinking about hundreds, and my definition of stunts varies slightly, but we'll get on to that. So cool. I always call this like the willy waving bit. This is the bit at the beginning just to say why I'm here, what I do. So 12 years in PR. I founded Radioactive PR nearly 5 years ago. Worked on PR for various big brands, and there are the logos to prove it. I wrote Myths of PR, and it came out in 2017. Within a few days, became the best-selling PR book on Amazon. In my own agency, I started a 4-day week for the same pay. Last year, it's done incredibly well. We're still growing as a company. Margins are still what they were, etc. And I, as I just mentioned, founded what now is I won't mention the name of the company, but UK's #1 PR blog. So thoughts on stunts. Whenever I talk to potential clients, one of these three things comes up, and they'll say, "Aren't stunts unmeasurable? Is there a tacky element to this? It's not really serious, and/or, aren't they quite hit and miss?" Well, I want to get into each of these. A stunt is usually, in my mind, a one-off. Campaign being more multi-stage. As to Mandy's kind of point on the Matilda campaign, the statues being a stunt element or aspect of a much broader campaign. And I think the language around PR stunts is particularly negative, co-opted in particular on Twitter to kind of to take on political issues or celebrity issues. When somebody does something, it's always a PR stunt. It's just for attention. Again, back to, I guess, the dictionary definition. So for me, it's a case of, well, as an industry, when I first set out PR examples, or when I first started PR examples, and I said, we're going to be celebrating PR stunts, it really was to kind of claw that back a bit and say, a PR stunt isn't a bad thing inherently. And, we'll get on to why. So to tackle, first of all, the fact that it's unmeasurable, there are plenty of campaigns and stunts that we could have looked at, but the first one that I wanted to do, and I dip around the industry for throughout these slides, both some things that we've done at Radioactive and some things that the wider industry has done. The vegan sausage rolls. There was so much work done around that as a stunt that I think that we need to look at that and say, the launch of that for me was, typical stunt, typical from a visual perspective, typical from the kind of media that they targeted with that. And I think this was a Taylor Herring launch, and the actual results of this were phenomenal. I'd say that it's actually taken conversations about vegetarianism and veganism further than it was, and I think there were various kind of activations around it. One thing that we did at Radioactive, we worked with Mobros. They're a male grooming brand, and they said, "Hey, we need big kind of big land at Christmas." So we came up with the idea that I think one of the team they bring their dog in, that typical office dog thing. We were all in there coming up with ideas, and there's that notion that stroking a pet reduces stress and releases oxytocin. I can't pronounce it. And we thought, well, who's stressed? Shoppers. Okay, who's the client? Mobros. Right, what can we do? There's bound to be, Mobros, where every one of their customers has a beard. It's just, every product is oriented around beards. So we thought, well, what do we do? Well, let's take stress shoppers, and can we have a campaign where we have people get paid to have their beard stroked, and all that money will go to a charity that was close to the guys at Mobros' hearts. So they chose Shelter, and just by virtue of having that kind of paid mechanism and that opt-in, and a big part of this was the PR for SEO aspect that we do a lot of, which is just essentially link building, but through smart editorial. We went out and basically said, sign up here if you'd like to get your beard stroked and get paid for it. Well, we had 5,500 people sign up, and you can see there from the page views perspective, and again, we're talking about something being measurable or not measurable. That's tens of thousands of people that have hit that page that we can then retarget them through social. We made sure that Facebook pixels were on, so you can retarget through Facebook, Instagram. If they're hitting the page, chances are they are either target market or they know somebody that is. Of those opt-ins, that's 5,500 people with beards. That, and this is just post GDPR, I think. So, clients and brands were conscious of how they get opted-in data. So we've given them, plenty more people from a potential customer base, and it was all just PR fees because the client actually had a concession in a shopping centre that we used as the place where this took place. And the images were fantastic. Got hundreds of pieces of coverage, as I say, and from actually. It got so much more coverage in the build-up to the day that the stunt happened, and then when it actually happened, it was more about it was kind of more broadcasty, more less big impact stuff from a link building / sending traffic perspective, which was most important to the guys being an online business. This is one of my favourite campaigns or stunts from the last few years, and it's something that a lot of people remember. It's the Missing Sight campaign, and they worked. This is I forget which agency did it now. I think pardon?
MHP.
It was MHP, wasn't it? Yeah, of course it was. Yeah, it was. So absolutely fantastic campaign where they worked with a number of brands and organisations to obviously, as you can see through from the slide, very well known to the public, and they took letters that were in inverted commas missing from those logos, and it's just an incredibly brilliant visual way to represent the need for the need for people to give blood. And you probably can't see there through the results, but pushing through the reach metrics, the most important thing there is that more than 30,000 people signed up to give blood in the first 10 days of the campaign, and that there is exactly why I think this campaign is so fantastic, because it's not just about a clever creative idea executed well, it's about actual measurement, actual results that, in this case, we all joke PR doesn't save lives, etc. Well, this genuinely is. This can have a huge, huge impact. And when I say about measuring up, the things I'm typically looking for, and the things that we talk to clients most about, will increase sales, will increase site traffic, increase in links, increase in sign-ups, opt-ins. You can force a link and kind of push through a sign-up form, and essentially how are you tracking. And I'll leave this on just for a moment. And actually, I don't know if the slides are getting sent out afterwards, but they will be. I'm getting nods. That link there is a blog that I've written about Google Goals and how you can use Google Goals and funnels and essentially look at and measure the impact of your work. So have a look at that right there. And to look at it's something tacky, is it not serious? Well, obviously the Missing Sight campaign is serious. But this is from a few years ago now. This is the Thai Health Foundation, and it was a secret camera stunt. Remember when they were quite popular? There were a number of kids walking around with fags. Sorry, I don't know if we've got international on, with cigarettes, walking around with cigarettes, saying, going up to people that were smoking, saying, "Hey, can you do you have a light? Can you light me up?" And obviously, then the adult says, "Whoa, you're a kid. What are you doing?" Well, that's kind of the point. And then the kid left. Each of those people, they did this, dozens, if not hundreds of times. I edited it into a really smart secret camera film. I think it's about 60 seconds long. If you just type in Thai Health Foundation smoking kid, you'll find it. And they recorded a 40% increase in the number of calls to the helpline. And that there, so post-campaign, so obviously the people that they gave pamphlets to after they rightly said, "No, you shouldn't smoke, you're a kid," I gave a number of reasons. The kids were like, "Well, why?" and insisted on why they shouldn't. And of course, the adult then is just telling them back all the reasons why they shouldn't smoke. So this here is taking a serious situation. Again, can this save lives? So really like that campaign. And a few people will remember this one as well. It's Khan's Project 84. That again, name of the building escapes me, but they positioned 84 mannequins to show the number of men that die as a result of suicide. And this sparked a real national conversation. And I don't have the stats to hand, but sparked a massive increase in the number of people calling Khan's helpline as well. So for me, that as a campaign is tackling something serious in a visual way. And as Mandy touched on, and I'll get onto again in the future, in this, it's important that you can talk around a stunt in as simple a way as possible. And this, as a visual representation of such a serious message, I thought was fantastic. And this is some work we did with the National Gallery. So taking an exhibition the National Gallery had called Beyond Caravaggio, and they came to us and said, hey, how do we make this, how can we kind of attack this in a creative way, in a way that's going to increase footfall? So we had, weirdly, somebody in the office had watched something on Italia's Got Talent, so Britain's Got Talent, Italian sister program, and there was a troupe that recreated paintings using lighting, makeup, and music. So we thought, I wonder if we could do the same thing with Caravaggio's paintings. And those pictures you're looking at there are, so the one on the left is Caravaggio's painting, the one on the right is the recreation. So we, outside of Trafalgar Square, had a kind of unveiling, and hundreds of people showed up, if not 1,000 plus. Sky News, BBC News, etc. And the National Gallery reported a massive increase in footfall from both from the obvious press coverage, but also a lot of people right there then walked into the gallery. And what it was is actually quite poignant and beautiful. This, which sounds incredibly corny, but when you work to bring, I think it ended up being something like 80 people over from Italy, plus their families, plus a number of other people to make this happen. Just the unveiling of these, kind of remarkable human performances did a great thing for the gallery, and got some incredibly nice feedback from them. But for me, that was, I think, a year into running the agency, so I was particularly proud of it. And this here is probably not common for ex-Amster to be. Everybody's pretending now they've not heard of them. Probably not common for ex-Amster to be in many professional webinars, but they did an incredible campaign, or an incredible stunt, where in Utah a bill was passed that reduced the sex education that children received. I think it's quite a conservative state, and they basically said, hey, we don't really want our kids learning about this. Well, ex-Amster then did an incredible thing where they kind of geo-fenced users, and when you hit the website, this came up and said, actually, Utahns consume the most porn per capita of any US state. And then they created an entire series of videos, all safe for work, all sex education orientated, basically to get to the younger population, the kind of older teens, I guess, that weren't currently being educated because of this bill that had passed. And the number of the number of pieces of coverage this got was phenomenal. But equally, I just like that there's a company that it didn't need to step in. It didn't have a particular dog in the race, but it stepped up with a clever a clever creative approach to a serious issue. And then when people say that stunts can be quite hit and miss, I always think go no to low budget. So Monopoly, who actually, if you look on PR Examples today, you'll see Monopoly's just released a kind of version of the game where when women pass go, they get paid more than men. To spark the conversation about the wage gap. So well worth checking out. But they also did a campaign a couple of years ago where they hid real money in a limited number of sets. Now, what's this going to do? Kind of Willy Wonka-esque. Every PR, when you sit down and chat through ideas, some golden ticket-esque idea comes up. But this came in and sparked an increase in sales. But also, I think it's a really nice, and I know there's 15 grand on the table, but for a brand like Hasbro, I think it's Hasbro, isn't it? It's Monopoly. That's obviously relatively small change. So they hid that much money in a limited number of sets. And again, if you just Google that, you'll see share total coverage. And this, when I think no to low budget, this is something that during the World Cup, obviously we all got quite taken in. There's a street in Gloucester where I'm from called Southgate Street. So one lunch, I printed off a Gareth sign, ran past the Southgate Street sign, put it on, didn't say anything. Local news ran it, and it kind of grew out from there. And then 12 days later, saw Visa do the exact same thing. Now they did the same thing at Southgate Station in London, but as a result of TfL needing to prove spend, David Fraser over at Ready 10, he found that document. They spent 90 grand on that story. On a story, on something that I previously got coverage with, I should have tied it to some brand or something like that. It was just me having a laugh and trying to make people smile. They spent 90 grand on exactly the same story. So it's a case of they could have got that. God knows where they spent that money. But either way, go no to low budget. You can still create impact. You can still grab attention. This here is a campaign we did for a client where you can get your face painted into. It seems like all of our stunts are painting orientated. You can get your stunt paint, your face paint, or friend or family member or whatever painted into kind of classical art. Well, not long after Katie Hopkins had said whatever terrible things she'd said about that poor boy that they'd drowned. She also came out and said, "I'm the Jesus of the outspoken," and something about her disciples, her followers. Well, we had some fun with it, and we had her repainted as Jesus crucified, as Christ crucified, but with every print sold, the proceeds going to a migrant charity. And people, A, like the idea of Katie Hopkins being crucified for some reason, and B, like the idea that it was almost one in the eye. And that was kind of what we did the campaign for. It was actually a link building campaign. This was something that the client came to us and said, "Hey, how do we get a lot of people linking to our on-site content?" So we thought, well, this is quite a smart way of of highlighting exactly what it is you do. And the from this, thousands of pounds raised, hundreds of prints were sold. It's just a really quick, kind of low budget, relatively idea that was almost kind of risk free because we actually even got. We didn't send it to Katie Hopkins, but of course, being who she is, she's going to see it and she's going to love it because it's attention. So that just gave us more ammo from a press perspective, from a link perspective. So the client was very happy, raised money for charity, did quite a nice job. And this one is one of my favourite. I always use this one when I talk about stunts. It's one of my favourite campaigns, or one of my favourite stunts even. Where Hal Pizza, they're a New Zealand-based company known for particularly controversial stunts. Well, when they released their rabbit pizza at Easter, they created a billboard made entirely of rabbit pelts, and obviously that upset all the right people. Was good for was enjoyed by all the all the right people too. And I just think something like that, you're going to have a reaction. And again, we'll get onto what a good stunt should do. That stunt right there, you're going to have an opinion on it. You're going to think it's either you're going to think it's daft, stupid, funny. You're going to think, right, that's disgusting, and obviously that's what they need and want. That's what any good stunt should do. Should give make you or force you to have an opinion. On to this, explainable in a sentence. Mandy mentioned it. You need to be able to, if you can't pitch it in a sentence before journalists hung up, time stretched, or kind of time poor journalists before they've said, "Look, get out my face. Can you explain the stunt?" And/or could you explain it to somebody when you're chatting? In the pub or whatever. Does the stunt relate to the product or service it's promoting? That's a big, that's an important one. Often you see stunts that are, they're great ideas, but you just think that was for somebody else, or that would have worked so much better for this brand. Are there clear and measurable objectives? As in, essentially, at the end of it, can you measure it? Can you come back to, that sent this much traffic, this many links, which helps site visibility in this way, or increase this increase in calls to this helpline. And importantly, and again, Mandy touched on this one, is it visual? Because if it's not visual, then you're not going to get much from a kind of press splash perspective. And also, you want it to be visual for social because algorithmically it ranks better. What should it do? It should reach the intended audience. 2, create a reaction. Just touched on that. 3, answer the client brief. 4, inspire thought and/or debate, shock or entertain. I very much see PR as an interruption. I see all marketing as an interruption, to be honest. And if we're going to be interrupting people, the least we can do is be entertaining, informative, or inspiring, some thought. So that's very much what I see a good stunt as. And done some work with Paddy Power over the years. They have a great ethos in their brand briefs where they say one of the ways we differentiate ourselves is basically by caring only for the audience that they work for, or they want to reach. So it's all about customers, and that there's a direct pull from a Paddy Power brief, which Obviously, they thrive on the whole mischief element, which had been missing for a couple of years, and they brought it back a little bit recently. But I like that. I like thinking, let's make it for the people that you actually want to reach. And for me, creative thinking is a process that it generally follows a couple of steps. One, know your client, insight which leads to strategy, competitors, audience. Research, what's worked in the space, what have competitors done, what's your client done, what's happened in similar sectors. Say it out loud. Again, can you imagine that as a headline? If you talk your stunt through, can you imagine it as a headline? Does it inspire thought, debate? Again, kind of going over important, but ground I've already spoken about. And is it measurable? Another thing to touch on is reactive and seasonal stunts. Like once this is showing a bit of I don't know about age, but when Miley Cyrus twerked at the VMAs, immediately the agency I was working with, we had a stunt ready to go for Les Mills, a twerking class, but it was we just found an instructor. I think it was the next day or the day after. We were out there with a twerking class that we got journalists to that you could sign up to. And it was quick, it was simple, it's easy, it's measurable. You can, it got some good coverage. B&Q, in preparation for 50 Shades before the film was released, they said that there might be an increase in demand for certain types of certain ropes and things like that. Now that memo, absolute nonsense. I'm sure it was. Some PR somewhere that thought, hey, let's leak this memo, but it did very, very well. And that's one of ours. We created something where you could get paid for playing Pokemon Go. This was, I don't know if you remember when Pokemon Go was launched, but it kind of feels weird now to think of how many people were playing it, talking about it. Well, I think it was launched on a bank holiday weekend. On the Tuesday, everybody's back to work. We said, well, you need to walk to hatch your eggs and do whatever, to progress in the game. Will people be able to do that when they're back at work? Possibly not. What if we created kind of a mini marketplace for this where you can get paid to or pay people to play Pokemon Go, and did incredibly well. This was for a local service professional client of ours where you go on there to pay people to do certain services, like plumbing, personal training, that kind of thing. Again, link building brief performed fantastically across that, but it was just seeing something happen, thinking we should do something or we could do something with that. Pitfalls. So Richard Bailey, who now runs PR Place, I think he was at Leeds Met at the time, and I remember reading this from him and thinking it was particularly astute, thinking, I'm going to steal that and put it in some slides for the future. Judgment is the most valuable and most underrated skill in PR, particularly in and around stunts. And a good example for me was when Katie Price basically vowed never to book a wedding again with sandals. Sandals, and I spoke to the team that did this, they were terrified before doing it, came back and said, that's fine, we'll give you a refund, but you're not allowed back for any future weddings, which was particularly spiteful, but also really well measured. And I'm conscious of time, so what I'm going to do is, again, I think some of you will be getting these slides, a couple of other ill-judged stunts right there. Top line, don't shoehorn a good idea into a brand. Don't rush to use a new medium or technology. We see a lot of that with VR, with things like that over the years. Don't mistake headlines and retweets for success, because at the end of the day, if it's just PR people backpatting PR people, what does it matter? We've got one client that spent 6 figures on a campaign, literally nothing. We had to fight to get them to even do any other creative PR because their financial director was absolutely livid and completely against it. A load of links there that you can barely see on that background to the top 20 stunts and campaigns of each year on PR Examples. Do have a look. It goes all the way back to 2012. It's done every year and it's a fantastic resource. There's actually an updated peso model. I had to play around with it. So again, do have a look. I think anybody that's aware of the peso model potentially could find that quite interesting and useful. And there's a little bit about me right there. Follow me on Twitter, etc., where I tweet probably far too much. And we're back.
Hey. I guess we're going to check for some questions as well, but let's kick off with one of my first questions. Thank you both in advance. Just obviously a few quick questions following your presentation and obviously your expertise. What do you think is the best way to integrate a stunt into a wide-ranging campaign? either of you, Mandy or Rich, who wants to tackle that? You touched upon it a little bit, Mandy.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's about going back to what do you want to deliver? What's the purpose? What's the comms challenge? And what are we trying to achieve through the comms? And if, you look at, you have to come at it from the idea, and then you have to layer around it. It's kind of what I'm saying. It's the idea at the centre. And if that idea will be really well replicated or brought to life through a stunt type of activity, then do a stunt. But it just, I don't believe, should work necessarily alone if you're trying to do a comms campaign, because it doesn't have the impact, I don't believe.
Rich, any additional thoughts about that?
No, I think exactly as was kind of said, it is a distillation of a message. So if you're running into a campaign, ideally there is an overarching message, an overarching strategy. Essentially, a stunt for me is the visual representation of that. So if you can fit it in, brilliant. But again, as I just said, try not to shoehorn it.
Perfect. How has social and SEO changed the nature and objectives of stunts, would you say?
I think it's changed it massively. I think in the last 5 years or so, we've seen a real decrease in the number of, and obviously I've got since 2012 that I've been looking very closely at it, but before, I think 2007, 2008 was when I got into PR, and I immediately got into stunts because I saw a Resident Evil stunt where they hid body parts around London. Yeah. Fantastic campaign by Monument PR, and then there was of course that second PR element where they said, oh God, there are still arms out there. We haven't found all the body parts. We don't want to scare some kids. So for me, I've been looking at stunts over the years, and you see a real trend away from the bigger kind of let's make something big, let's make food big, let's stick something in front of Tower Bridge. You've seen a move away from that. Why? Because client budgets dictate that. For me, it's rare that I get a client brief that basically says, hey, we've got 6 figures, let's go spend it and have some fun. It's always, how do we turn this back around into something that's actually measurable, into something that's useful, which is why all of ours have an aspect of them that, that ensures that there is measurability, but also some of them fly under the radar and you'd never know that they were what I still perceive to be a stunt, because, the idea is that it doesn't get that kind of big splash. It gets it's there from a link building perspective. It's there from a data opting perspective. So I think it's changed it enormously. Our client budgets have changed.
I think you touched upon it. Is bigger necessary better?
Not necessarily. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it can be. Sometimes it can work fantastically well. But so something like the WaterAid campaign, absolutely fantastic. Yeah. Visual, it's huge. You can't fail but to notice it.
Yeah, I think numbers create impact, but it has to just go beyond that. There has to be a deeper story. I mean, I think one of the days of floating big things down the Thames and stuff, unless there's a real reason for that, I personally would steer away from that kind of stuff.
How important is the social cause or charitable angle in the stunt, do you think? Mm-hmm. Are those related to social causes or charities land more successfully?
Yes, probably. I would say they probably are. It just depends on what you're doing. I mean, I think the examples I gave, most of them have a more serious message or an undercurrent of a kind of purpose behind them. I'm just not a big lover of kind of just one-dimensional stunts that are just kind of self-serving brand kind of things. I feel like there has to be something more to it. So I do think stunts work well for charities if it's the right idea. It's about the idea, but I do think that they tend to land better because they're just less self-serving, and there seems, there's a bigger purpose. So people are much more likely to engage with it. Media are much more likely to run it. Over and above, we're just promoting. We want to sell more Greggs sausage rolls. It's for brands. You have to be cleverer. And not necessarily clever, but you have to look at things differently than if it's a kind of charity stunt, I think.
Have you ever argued the time and budget spent on a stunt versus paid advertising, paid social, which may stick around for longer?
Do you know what? Now I don't feel like we have to argue for one or the other. I think that it's you combine it into a mixed model, and you take a stunt. As I mentioned earlier on, when we are intentionally sending traffic because we forced that link through an editorial idea, which I'm aware is a load of buzzwords, but effectively, does what clients need. Then we even going out with that idea, we've already said, let's make sure there's a paid social aspect to this, whereby we're retargeting, maybe with the same message, maybe not, but we know that we're hitting that audience. Now, every client will come to us and say, right, why should we spend X thousand on this and not just chuck it in paid social PPC? And for us, it's a case of justifying the need for PR, and sometimes it's not the right answer. I think we as PRs need to get out of that mindset of, we see a brief, we answer only in PR speak, we answer only in PR tactics or strategy. We think, because for me, it's all about reaching an audience. How do we get to them? What they listen to, watching, consuming, and consuming means social too, means search. How do we get to those people? Well, sometimes it isn't a stunt. Sometimes it isn't, a survey or whatever it might be. Sometimes we need to think and build the resources in-house or an agency even to be able to deliver against their actual problem. Sometimes the solution isn't PR in its traditional sense. It's, as I said, that mixed model.
Just going back to, just want to make sure we cover all your questions, so bear with me one moment. Is there a particular time of year that's good for stunts? Is there a bad period that you just wouldn't even propose doing a stunt?
Christmas is always really busy.
Christmas is fun.
And, you've got to get cut through at Christmas, and also after Christmas we've done stunts, quite a lot of stunts, pre-Christmas, during Christmas, after Christmas. It's just about doing things different. You have to stand out. So I wouldn't say just be aware of what else is going on, really.
Sure.
Yeah. There's a question that says, I noticed that a lot of the examples didn't involve talent. Do you think the days of touting out a celeb for the purpose of a stunt are done? Has influencer culture swayed that?
You're doing my job, Rich.
I am. I'm feeling for But I mean, for me, we have done stunts that have involved talent. Again, I do think that changing client budgets over the last few years has meant, do we need those people? And as it touches on there, influencer culture. If we can work with an influencer on a kind of pay performance model, whereby it's not just paying them for their involvement. If we can. I guess the important thing again is who's the audience, who are we hoping to reach. If it means rolling Joey Essex out again, because that's the audience that the client wants to reach, great, we'll do that. But I think I tend to switch off from those because, and I assume that many consumers possibly do as well, because there's just not it comes back to, is it relevant to the product and or service? Well, often no, you're just getting somebody who's, with an audience. Well, you can use certain tools to look at those influencers and or celebrities' engagement rates. Chances are that they're not going to be good for the brand. I wouldn't chuck 20 grand at an influencer or a celebrity just because.
No, I agree.
Thank you very much. Right,
Do you want to read this one?
I'll read the next question, yeah. Haven't been briefed properly, obviously. Have you seen a shift in engagement? We talk a lot about engagement. Have you seen a shift in engagement with PR stunts and possible newswire services as well? Have you seen any from your own prospective experience?
What does that mean? What, in terms of people being less engaged or more engaged?
Yeah.
Is that the full question?
Go on.
Sometimes seen that it's harder to achieve cut-through.
Sorry, let me read that so everyone can hear it. Bear with me 1 second. Have you seen a shift in engagement with PR stunts and newswire services? It can sometimes mean that it's harder to achieve cut-through with the likes of PA, etc., for editorial opportunities, and they are seeking commercial opportunities more.
Yeah, well, I mean, yes, I have seen all of that, because obviously there's less editorial than there is paid for slots, so the competition is greater, and as we know, magazines are closing all the time. Almost yesterday, wasn't there? So I think it is harder to secure editorial. I think and definitely in certain sectors, whether it's parenting or consumer, it's tough. Again, I think it's about creating fully layered campaigns that have lots of different assets and lots of different touch points to spread the message as far and wide as you can, obviously amongst your target audience. Don't rely on just one route. So it's, again, going back to the same thing, it's like a stunt is one part of a kind of representation of an idea, and it's like a Trojan horse. It's a kind of physical or visual thing that represents a message, and it has to go beyond that one-off piece of activity. So you're much better to look at lots of different assets, lots of different routes into media, lots of different touch points, social, digital, features, stories, de-risk it. Yeah, and I think it's just about having something that goes a bit deeper than just a one-hit wonder. I mean, we tend not to do those. We just, I mean, some of the stuff you presented, Mitch, they're really good and they're funny. I think if you've got humour and you've got a brand that's happy to take a risk and be bold and be a bit cheeky, it's kind of a different world, because you can go out and you can do these things. You can be really quite bold and brave, and it's funny and people like it, and it's in and out. But I think some of the stuff that we've presented, they're more serious, actually, in the message that we're trying to get across. So we've created these kind of visualised them through stunts, but there's so many different elements into it. So I think you have to be clever about how you.
I mean, you could say this exact same thing for kind of earned media as a whole. Is it harder to get earned media? Is essentially the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not just about stunts.
No.
If the idea is good enough, if the creative is good enough, you will get coverage.
Yeah.
Just conscious of time, so a couple more questions, and obviously we can go back to our work and everything. How involved or instrumental have your clients been when planning the PR campaigns, and obviously with stunts specifically in mind? Have they been quite involved, or
real mixed bag? I think is probably going to be the same answer for you, right?
Depends on the client.
If the client loves the idea of getting involved, and a lot of clients always come to you and want to do stunts, is exactly what you said at the beginning. It's just then whether it's so common that you sell somebody on an idea, and then it goes through 3 or 4 more layers of bureaucracy, and then you end up with an incredibly watered down version of the idea that you don't believe in anymore. So it's not uncommon to have that excitement at the beginning, and then it goes through that that typical corporate kind of pathway, and then you just think, Christ, we're not even doing the same thing anymore. But then equally, some clients are incredibly hands off and let you do what you want to do. So real mixed bag.
There's a lot of questions talking about location and things like that. We've got 2 more questions that we're going to cover off. But this is quite interesting, because obviously with some examples we've looked at sort of London and central based, but obviously PRs are up and down the country. So quick question for you guys. Can regional-led stunts that are linked with regional stats or research, etc., still get substantial coverage in national media, do you think?
I'm trying to think of one. I'm absolutely sure that there have been and can be, yeah. I don't think, because what that almost says is there is a London bias, and I think if you've got the right, again, it comes back to the idea. If you've got the right idea, this backed up by the right message, stats, insights, then I can't see any reason why not. I'm just trying to think now of.
I think the Southgate one.
Pardon? The Southgate one, yeah, potentially. But tell you what, that's a good question. Whoever asked that, tweet me and I'll see if I can find some examples of regional stuff.
Great, perfect. One last question, I think, before we wrap up, if that's okay. Put you both on the spot now. What has been your favourite stunt so far of 2019?
Oh, God.
Oh, no. The clock ticking.
I've got some. Well, I've got a few, but I can only pick one, right?
Please.
I love the seesaws at the Mexican border. Obviously, I know everyone loves that. I mean, for me, it was just so simple and such a brilliant message. Basically, you just didn't need any words with that. You just got it. Well, most people just get it, I would have thought. As in, you need both sides to make a difference, and the balance and the pink and just everything about it for me was pretty perfect. So that would be one of my favourites this year.
Rich, there are too many, I bet.
Do you know what I do?
There must be a standout one for you so far. I know we're in September.
I like the Pornhub one. That was good.
Pornhub one, which was that?
The Pornhub one where they've done the dirtiest
porn
film ever, and they basically filmed it on a beach full of litter and garbage and plastic, and it's all designed to raise money and try and get people to clear up and not use plastic, etc. It's quite clever. It's very good content and very clever, so I've looked that one up.
That's a good shout. Do you know what I do? Because I'm endlessly positive about it all, every time I tweet a new stunt, I'm like, this is brilliant, this is great, it's the best thing I've seen, and then, so I don't want to kind of trip myself up and say, yeah, that's the one. I'm going to hang my hat on that.
Let's ask you at the end of the year.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Well, I think that's all we've got time for. I mean, it's been thrilling. So thank you both, Rich Rich and Mandy so much for the last hour. I hope everyone's enjoyed it as well. I don't know about you guys, but I feel ready to go out and run all manner of stunts after your expert insight. So thank you everyone for listening today. If you're interested in attending any other of Cision webinars or our events, keep an eye on our website. And that's all for now. Goodbye everyone. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.